The ballroom shimmered under 1,000 chandeliers, the air thick with perfume, laughter, and the clinking of champagne flutes. From where Ethan stood, behind the marble pillars, mop bucket beside him, the Gala looked like another world. He could see his reflection in the polished floor, distorted by the ripples of spilled champagne. His uniform was clean but old, the faded navy fabric pulling at the shoulders from years of hard work and little sleep. He was a janitor, invisible among the glittering crowd. And yet, fate had plans that even money couldn't buy. "Ethan, stay out of the main hall tonight," his supervisor had warned. CEOs hosting a charity gala. Big names, press, donors. They don't want janitors in their pictures. Ethan nodded, as he always did. He needed this job. His daughter, Lily, was 11, her school fees overdue again. Tonight, while the rich toasted their success, Ethan planned to clean quietly in the background and leave before anyone noticed. He didn't know that this night would burn itself into his life forever. From the ballroom came the soft swell of a live orchestra. Couples spun across the floor, their diamonds catching the light. Ethan moved discreetly along the edge, wiping tables and picking up glasses no one noticed missing. His body ached, but he found comfort in the rhythm. Clean, step, lift, wipe, like a quiet dance of his own. Then he saw her. A young woman in a white gown stood near the grand piano, her hand resting lightly on the instrument's polished surface. She wasn't looking around like the others. Her head tilted slightly, as though she were listening to the air itself. Her eyes, pale and unfocused, told him what he hadn't realized at first. She was blind. Her beauty wasn't loud or practiced. It was soft, real. Her dark hair fell loose down her back, her expression peaceful yet distant, like she lived in a world that no one else could see. Someone whispered her name nearby. Clara Harrington, the CEO's daughter. Ethan froze. Harrington, the same name etched on every product his company cleaned. The richest man in the city. Clara stepped away from the piano, her hand gliding along its surface of balance. People gave her a wide berth, not out of cruelty, but discomfort. They didn't know how to act around her. The music swelled, and couples began pairing off again. But Clara stood alone. Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. He couldn't say why. Maybe it was a sight of her standing there, surrounded by people yet isolated by her blindness. Then the unthinkable happened. Her cane, placed beside the piano, slipped and clattered to the floor. It rolled toward the crowd. Laughter echoed faintly. Someone pointed. No one moved to help. Without thinking, Ethan stepped forward. He picked up the cane and walked toward her, his boots echoing against the marble. "Miss," he said softly, "you dropped this." Her head turned slightly toward his voice. "Oh," she smiled faintly. "Thank you. I didn't hear it fall." He placed it gently in her hand. For a moment, their fingers brushed, callous against delicate skin. "You're not one of the guests, are you?" she asked, her voice curious, not judgmental. Ethan hesitated. "No, I work here." Clara smiled. "Then you're probably the most honest man in this room." Ethan chuckled awkwardly. "I'm not sure about that." The orchestra changed to a slow waltz. Couples drifted together. Clara tilted her head. "It sounds beautiful. I've always wanted to dance at one of these galas." Her words hung there, wistful, impossible. Ethan swallowed. He should leave. It wasn't his place. But something inside him stirred, something reckless, maybe kind. He extended his hand, trembling slightly. "Would you like to?" She laughed softly, disbelieving. "Dance? With you?" "Yes, if you trust me." Her fingers hovered uncertainly in the air before resting in his. "All right," she whispered. And in that moment, the janitor and the blind heiress stepped into the spotlight no one expected. The crowd fell silent. Whispered murmurs rippled like wind through the hall. Cameras paused. The CEO, Richard Harrington, looked up from his table, his expression unreadable. But Ethan didn't see them. He guided Clara gently, one step at a time. Her movements were cautious at first, counting his rhythm, trusting his lead. Then something incredible happened. She began to move with grace, her face glowing with freedom, her laughter rising above the music. Every step felt like defiance, a break in the invisible wall that separated their worlds. When the song ended, Clara's fingers lingered in his hand. "You dance like someone who knows pain," she said softly. Ethan met her sightless eyes. "Maybe I do." Applause erupted. Some genuine, most polite. But among the faces, Richard Harrington stood still, his jaw tight, his gaze sharp. The CEO stood. The music died. "Clara," he said, his voice controlled but cold. "A word, please." The room went silent. Clara's expression fell. "Father, Now." Ethan stepped back, realizing his mistake too late. He bowed awkwardly. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean." But Harrington didn't even glance at him. He placed a hand on Clara's shoulder and guided her away, his expression dark. Ethan watched them go, a sinking feeling in his chest. The applause faded. Conversations resumed. He returned to his mop, but his hands trembled. He didn't know why the CEO's look chilled him so deeply. Maybe it was because for a brief moment, when their eyes met, Ethan saw something in Richard Harrington's gaze that wasn't anger. It was fear. That night, after the gala ended, Ethan stayed late cleaning. The floor still sparkled from where they danced. He tried to shake off the memory, the way Clara had smiled, how her hand had felt in his. It was foolish, he told himself. She was a Harrington. He was nobody. But as he mopped near the piano, he noticed something under it, a small, folded piece of fabric, a white handkerchief embroidered with the initial CH. He picked it up gently, turning it over in his hands. There was something faint on it, a stain. Not wine, not makeup. Something darker, almost like blood, and tucked within the fold, barely visible, was a thin strip of paper with a line written in trembling handwriting. "He isn't who he says he is." Ethan's heart stopped. He looked toward the exit where Richard Harrington had disappeared with his daughter. Something about that note, and the fear in the CEO's eyes, told Ethan that the gala was only the beginning. Ethan couldn't sleep that night. The city outside his apartment buzzed with its usual midnight sounds, honking cars, distant sirens, the faint hum of a streetlight that flickered just outside his window. But his mind was back in the ballroom. He could still hear the echo of the orchestra, still see Clara's smile, still feel the weight of that small, blood-stained handkerchief in his hand. He sat at the kitchen table in his one-room apartment. The note unfolded before him. "He isn't who he says he is." The words crawled under his skin. He turned the handkerchief over again and again, tracing the delicate embroidery. CH for Clara Harrington. But that handwriting, shaky, urgent, looked like it belonged to someone afraid. Someone desperate to warn him. Was Clara in danger? Or was the note about someone else entirely? He thought of her father, Richard Harrington, tall, poised, powerful. The kind of man whose presence silenced a room. When their eyes had met, there had been something beyond anger. Ethan had seen fear, guilt, or something darker, something that didn't belong in a man so untouchable. He should throw the note away. Forget it. But Ethan had never been able to ignore a cry for help. Not since the night his wife had walked out, leaving him and their infant daughter with nothing but a note that said, "I can't do this anymore." He picked up his phone and stared at the company directory app. He wasn't supposed to have access, but as a janitor, he'd learned a few shortcuts to navigate it for maintenance requests. He searched Harrington, and there it was, Clara Harrington, Communications Office, Level 12, Harrington Global Headquarters. Before he realized it, he was already planning to clean that floor tomorrow. The next morning, the skyscraper gleamed in the sunlight like a monument to wealth. Ethan's old van sputtered into the underground parking lot. He changed into his uniform, locked the handkerchief in his locker, and pushed his cleaning cart into the elevator. Floor after floor, he passed polished executives who barely noticed him. The higher he went, the quieter the building became, until the doors opened onto Level 12, a world of glass, soft light, and silence. Only a few people worked there, mostly assistants and project coordinators. But at the far end of the corridor, Ethan saw her, Clara, seated by a window, headphones over her ears, fingers gliding over a braille display as she typed. Her white cane leaned against the desk beside her. He hesitated. He had no reason to talk to her. No permission. No plan. But she must have sensed him, because she paused, turned her head slightly, and smiled. "You're not supposed to mop in this wing till evening, are you?" Her voice was warm, teasing. Ethan froze, gripping the mop handle. Yeah, I guess not. I just got assigned early today." Clara smiled faintly. "You have a familiar voice." "Wait! You're the man from the Gala, aren't you? The one who danced with me." He exhaled. "Guilty." "Then I owe you another thank you." She reached out, her hand searching for him in the air. He stepped closer, gently placing his hand in hers. Her fingers were soft. "Cool. That was the first time I felt like the room wasn't staring at me with pity," she said quietly. "You made me forget for a moment that I was blind." Ethan's throat tightened. "You weren't blind. You were brighter than anyone there." A faint blush colored her cheeks. Flattery from a janitor? Dangerous combination. He laughed softly. "I'm serious." But before he could say more, a shadow fell over them. "Clara." It was Richard Harrington. His tone was sharp, controlled, the voice of a man accustomed to obedience. Clara straightened. "Father, I was just." "I can see that." His gaze shifted to Ethan, cold and precise. "I believe your department cleans this floor after 5. Ethan nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. I was just finishing up." "Good. Then finish elsewhere." For a moment, their eyes locked again. That same flicker of fear, or was it recognition, flashed across Harrington's face. Ethan gathered his things and left, but not before glancing back. Clara was turned slightly away from her father, her shoulders tense, as if trying to listen beyond what she was allowed to hear. That night, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about her, or the warning. He retrieved the handkerchief from his locker again. The stain, small but distinct, still looked like dried blood. He didn't know why, but something told him it wasn't random. Someone had planted it for him to find. Someone wanted him to know something about the Harringtons. The next day, while cleaning the CEO's private office, he noticed something strange. Behind the mahogany desk, a small cabinet door was locked with a keypad. Nothing unusual, except that the carpet near it was slightly scuffed, as though it had been moved often. And in the wastebasket nearby, beneath shredded documents, was a torn corner of photograph. He pieced it together. It showed Clara, smiling, standing beside a man who wasn't her father. A man in his 30s, dark-haired, casual clothes, arm around her shoulders. The image was cropped at the neck, but what remained of the background looked like a hospital room. Ethan frowned. On the back, written in faint pen, were the words, "Don't let him find out." His pulse quickened. He wasn't supposed to be here. He wasn't supposed to see this. He stuffed the fragment into his pocket and left before anyone noticed. Days passed. He avoided Clara, afraid of drawing attention. But one evening, as he was locking up, he found her waiting in the lobby. "Ethan," she said softly, turning toward his voice. He froze. "Miss Harrington, you shouldn't be here alone. I needed to talk to you." She clutched her cane tightly. "You found something at the Gala, didn't you?" Ethan's breath caught. "What do you mean?" "I know my handkerchief was missing. My father mentioned it. But I had written something inside it. A message." He took a step closer. "You wrote that note?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, but I didn't mean for you to find it. It was supposed to reach someone else." Her voice trembled slightly. "My father isn't who he says he is, Ethan. And if he knew you had that note, he'd destroy you." Ethan felt a chill crawl up his spine. "Why? What is he hiding?" Clara hesitated. "Do you know what happened to my mother?" He shook his head. "She died when I was 8. Or at least, that's what I was told. But a few months ago, I started getting letters, unsigned, suggesting she might still be alive. Hidden somewhere. My father says it's nonsense, but..." She swallowed hard. "I found a recording once. A woman's voice. She said, 'He's not your father.'" Ethan's world tilted. "What?" Clara's blind eyes filled with tears. "I don't know who to believe anymore. But every time I ask, someone gets fired. Or disappears." The lobby lights flickered. A shadow moved on the mezzanine security. Maybe. Ethan took her hand. Clara, if what you're saying is true, you need to be careful. She squeezed his fingers. Please, promise me you won't tell anyone about the note. He hesitated, then nodded. I promise. But deep down, he knew promises wouldn't be enough. Because when he returned home that night, his apartment door was slightly open, the lock broken, the air cold. He stepped inside, heart pounding, drawers overturned, the note and handkerchief gone, and on the kitchen table, a single envelope sat, unmarked. Inside was a photograph. It showed him and Clara dancing at the Gala. On the back, written in that same trembling hand, were just 3 words. They are watching you. The photograph shook slightly in Ethan's hands. He sat frozen at his kitchen table, the dim bulb above him flickering like a nervous pulse. The image stared back, him and Clara, mid-dance, the chandeliers gleaming behind them, her hand in his, the faintest smile on her lips. And in the blurry background, if you looked close enough, a man's shadowed face appeared near the corner of the frame, watching. Ethan had never seen that face before. But whoever it was, the man wasn't looking at Clara. He was looking straight at him. He flipped the photo again, reading the words scrawled on the back. They are watching you. The ink bled faintly into the paper, written in haste. His throat tightened. Someone had been in his apartment. Someone who knew where he lived. Someone who knew what he had found. He got up and checked on Lily. His daughter was asleep on the couch, her arms wrapped around the stuffed rabbit he'd stitched together from old shirts. 11 years old, too young to carry the burden of his fears. He brushed a lock of hair from her face, whispering softly, "It's okay, baby. Daddy's here." But he didn't believe his own words. The next morning, Ethan was at the building before dawn, hoping the emptiness would give him space to think. He went through the motions, mop, bucket, vacuum, wipe, but his eyes kept flicking to every reflection, every dark corner of the hallways. He couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. When the elevator doors opened on level 12, he almost jumped. A man in a sharp gray suit stepped out, speaking into an earpiece. Yes, she's not to leave the premises unaccompanied. Mr. Harrington's orders. Ethan ducked his head, pretending to mop. The man passed without a glance, but the words burned into his thoughts. She's not to leave the premises unaccompanied. Clara, something was happening. And it wasn't just paranoia. He made his way quietly toward the communications office. Clara was there again, her fingers moving over a Braille keyboard. The faint melody of a piano instrumental played from her earbuds. She didn't hear him approach until he gently tapped the edge of her desk. Clara. She startled slightly, pulling out one earbud. Ethan, you shouldn't be here. I know, but listen, he whispered. Someone broke into my apartment last night. They took the note and left this. He handed her the photo. She traced the surface, fingers brushing over the glossy print. They were in your home. Yeah, and whoever took it, they knew everything, even about us dancing. Clara's hand trembled slightly. Then we're both in danger. Clara, you need to tell me what's really going on, he said, his voice low, urgent. Who's watching you? Who's trying to stop you from talking about your mother? Clara's lips parted, as if to answer, but then the sound of approaching footsteps cut through the air. Sharp, heavy. Her expression froze. That's my father. Ethan stepped back, slipping behind a column just as Richard Harrington entered. Clara. His voice was calm, but cold beneath the surface. I told you not to meet anyone outside the family. I wasn't. Don't lie to me. His voice softened, but the edge was worse than anger. I protect you because you can't protect yourself. You know what happened last time you trusted a stranger. Clara's shoulders tightened. You mean the accident that blinded me? A silence fell, thick and loaded. Richard exhaled through his nose, adjusting his cufflinks. That's in the past. I'm only trying to keep you safe. She said nothing, but Ethan, hidden just feet away, saw her expression shift, a flicker of doubt, a suppressed pain. Richard turned to leave, but paused by the door. Oh, and Clara? The Gala photos came back. You won't see them, of course, but I reviewed each one. There was something unsettling, Someone was taking pictures who wasn't supposed to be there. He looked around the room slowly. His eyes passed over the column where Ethan stood hidden, and for one agonizing second, Ethan thought the CEO could see right through him. Then Richard turned away. "Lock the door behind me, Day." The moment he was gone, Clara collapsed back into her chair, her composure breaking. Ethan stepped forward. "Are you okay?" She shook her head. "His lying. About everything. That accident. I can't remember much, but sometimes I dream about fire, and a woman's voice calling my name. I don't think she was my mother." "What do you mean?" She said, "Run, Clara, run from him." Ethan's pulse quickened. "Clara, listen, you're not imagining this. I think your father's hiding something big, and I think that something might have gotten people hurt." She turned toward him, her unseeing eyes wide. "Then why are you helping me? You could lose your job, or worse." He hesitated. "Because no one helped me when I needed it." Clara reached out, finding his hand. "You remind me of someone," she said softly. "Before I lost my sight, there was a man who used to visit me when I was in the hospital. My father said he was one of the nurses. But his voice," she frowned, searching her memory, "it sounded like yours." Ethan felt a strange chill. "I've never met you before the Gala." "I know, but maybe our paths crossed without us realizing." He didn't know what to say. That night, Ethan couldn't leave things alone. Something about that photo fragment, the hospital background, the message don't let him find out, gnawed at him. After everyone left, he returned to the CEO's office. The halls were empty, the building dark. He slipped inside with his master key, one of the few perks of being trusted to clean every floor. The keypad cabinet still stood there, locked, but beside it, faint scratches lined the edge of the metal, for digits etched as if by accident, 0-8-2-4. He tried it. The lock clicked open. Inside were files, dozens of them, some labeled confidential, others with nothing but numbers. But one folder caught his eye, Project CH, phase terminated. He opened it. Inside were medical records. Patient name, Clara Harrington. Age 21. Diagnosis, post-traumatic vision lost due to optic nerve trauma. But at the bottom of the report, a signature, not a doctor's, read, Richard Harrington, Project Director. Ethan's stomach dropped. Project Director? Not father? He flipped through the pages. Photos of Clara in a hospital bed. 4 lines. Electrodes. Dates that didn't match what Clara had said. And at the very end, a page stamped in red. Subject 02. Successful transfer. Maternal specimen secured. He didn't understand. Not fully, but every instinct screamed that this was wrong. Then his phone buzzed. A text. Unknown number. "Get out. Now." Ethan spun around. The office door creaked open. A silhouette stood there, tall, precise, unmistakable. Richard Harrington. "Working late, are we?" Ethan's breath caught. "I was just cleaning." Richard stepped inside, closing the door behind him with a click that echoed like a lock snapping shut. His expression was calm. Too calm. "You've been quite curious lately, Mr. Cole." Ethan's mind raced. "How does he know my name?" "I noticed you talking to Clara," Richard continued. "She trusts you. That's dangerous." "I'm just trying to help," Ethan said quietly. "Help!" Richard smiled thinly. "You think you're some kind of savior. You're a janitor. You clean the date, not uncover it." He took a step closer, voice dropping. "You don't know what you're involving yourself in. Walk away, and I'll forget this ever happened." Ethan swallowed. "And if I don't?" Richard's smile vanished. "Then I'll make sure you disappear, just like everyone else who asked the wrong questions." The air between them grew heavy, charged with something dark. Then, without warning, Richard's phone buzzed. He looked down, frowning. "Stay out of my family's business, Mr. Cole," he said, slipping the phone away. "This is your last warning." He left, locking the door behind him. Ethan stood trembling, heart pounding, staring at the open cabinet, the file still in his hands. He knew one thing for certain now. This wasn't about infidelity or scandal. This was about something far worse. And somewhere in the shadows of that truth lay the real reason Clara had lost her sight. The documents trembled in Ethan's hands as if the pages themselves were alive with the secrets they carried. Project CH. Phase terminated. Subject 02. Successful transfer. Maternal specimen secured. He read the words again, heart pounding, eyes skimming lines he barely understood. Medical jargon. Lab reports. Signatures. But the meaning behind them bled through like poison through paper. Clara wasn't just a patient. She was part of an experiment. And her father hadn't been protecting her. He had been studying her. Ethan shoved the papers back into the folder, barely able to breathe. His instinct screamed to run, but his mind clung to one thought. Maternal specimen secured. Her mother. The mother she thought was dead. He snapped a few quick photos with his phone and slipped the folder back into the cabinet just as a cleaning drone whirred past the doorway. Its red sensor light swept the room, pausing for a second on him before moving on. He froze until the faint hum disappeared down the hall, then exhaled shakily and slipped out. The elevator ride down felt endless. Each floor chimed like a countdown to exposure. By the time he reached the underground parking lot, his palms were slick with sweat. He unlocked his van and climbed inside, the scent of motor oil and damp cloth grounding him back in reality. He needed to see Clara. She deserved to know the truth, even if it destroyed her. The next morning, the sky was a color of steel. Clouds hung low over the city as if warning that something terrible was about to break. Ethan waited near the garden terrace outside Harrington Global, pretending to trim hedges until Clara's assistant wheeled her out for her morning break. When the assistant left to take a call, Ethan stepped forward. "Clara," he whispered. She toned, recognizing his voice immediately. "Ethan, what are you doing here? You shouldn't." "I found something." His voice was urgent but hushed. "In your father's office. Documents. Medical files. About you." Her lips parted. "What kind of files?" He hesitated, struggling to find words gentle enough for something so cruel. "Records from when you were in the hospital. But they weren't just medical. They were experimental. There's a project name, Project CH. She frowned. "CH, those are my initials." "I know." Her hands clenched around her cane. "What did it say?" Ethan knelt beside her, voice low. "It said you were Subject 02. That the project was terminated, and there was something about a maternal specimen secured." She went pale. "My mother." He nodded. Clara's lips trembled as she whispered, "I told you." I kept hearing her voice. I thought it was in my head. "No, Clara." Ethan reached for her hand. It wasn't. For a long moment, neither spoke. The wind tugged at her hair, carrying the scent of rain and roses. Then she asked softly, "Why are you helping me, Ethan?" He hesitated. "Because I know what it feels like to lose everything and be lied to by the people you trusted most." She turned her face toward him, her sightless eyes glimmering with emotion. "My father isn't just lying, is he?" "No," Ethan said quietly. "He's hiding something that could destroy both of you." Before she could respond, the terrace door opened. A man in a gray suit, the same security officer from before, stepped out. "Miss Harrington," he said stiffly, "your father is looking for you." Clara nodded faintly. "Tell him I'll be right in." The man's gaze flicked to Ethan, sharp and cold. "Janitor," he said, "you're out of bounds." Ethan forced a polite smile. "Just cleaning, so." The man lingered for a moment before turning back inside. Ethan leaned closer. "Clara, listen. There's more I didn't tell you. There was a photo in his office. You and a man, not your father. It was taken in a hospital. On the back, it said, 'Don't let him find out.'" Clara's breath caught. "That man, he was my real father." Ethan stared. "What?" "My mother told me once, when I was little. She said, 'Your father loves you, but is not the one raising you.' I thought she meant he'd left. But now—" Her voice broke. Ethan squeezed her hand. "Clara, we'll find out the truth. Together." She nodded, tears threatening but not falling. "Be careful, Ethan. My father doesn't forgive curiosity. That night, Ethan's phone buzzed while he was washing dishes. A message from an unknown number. If you want answers about Project CH, meet me at Dock 47. Midnight. Come alone. He nearly dropped the phone. It could be a trap. Probably was. But if there was even a chance to uncover the truth, he had to take it. He left Lily sleeping under the soft glow of a nightlight, kissed her forehead, and whispered a promise he wasn't sure he could keep. Daddy will be right back. The docks were deserted, swallowed in fog and salt air. Cargo containers loomed like silent giants. The water slapped against the pylons with a slow, hollow rhythm. Ethan parked the van and stepped out, scanning the shadows. Then he saw her. A woman in a long coat stood beneath a flickering lamppost, her hair streaked with gray, her posture frail yet proud. "You came," she said, her voice trembling. Ethan froze. "Who are you?" The woman stepped closer, her face emerging into the light. Tired eyes, lined cheeks, but a familiarity that made his heart stop. "Name's Evelyn," she said. "Evelyn Harrington." He stared at her. Clara's mother. She nodded faintly. Yes, the one who was supposed to be dead. He took a step forward, disbelief mixing with relief. "She thinks you're gone." "I know," Evelyn whispered. "Richard made sure of that." "What happened?" Ethan asked. Her eyes glistened. "I used to work with him in genetics research. Before we were married, we were developing neural regeneration tech, ways to repair optic nerve damage. But Richard wasn't interested in healing. He wanted control, mind mapping, memory manipulation. He turned our research into an experiment. Project CH. Ethan's stomach twisted. What did he do to Clara? Evelyn's voice broke. "She was our daughter, Ethan. But when she was 8, she got sick, meningitis. Richard used her as a subject to test his neural mapping prototype. It failed. She went blind. I tried to stop him, to expose him, but he locked me away, sedated me, declared me dead." She stepped closer, trembling. "When I escaped, I sent letters to Clara, but she never got them. I think Richard intercepted everything. He's obsessed with her because she's the only living proof of what he did." Ethan felt a cold fury settle in his chest. He's been hiding all this for years. Evelyn nodded. "And he'll kill anyone who gets too close." "Then why tell me?" Ethan asked. "Because you're the first person Clara has trusted since she lost her sight. She listens to you. And you—" Evelyn stuttered him. "You look just like someone I once knew. A man who worked in our lab. He tried to protect Clara before everything went wrong." Ethan frowned. "Who?" She gave a sad, knowing smile. "You, Ethan. You were there. You just don't remember." His pulse thundered. "That's impossible. I've never—" "You were part of the experiment too," she said softly. "Subject 01. You volunteered after your wife died. You wanted a chance to restore your memory, to forget the trauma. But Richard wiped everything that connected you to us. Your past, your identity, everything." Ethan staggered back, the world spinning. "No, that can't be true." Evelyn's eyes filled with sorrow. "He took your memories, Ethan. He made you forget who you were. That's why you were drawn to Clara. On some level, you knew." Rain began to fall, soft at first, then harder, drumming against the metal containers. Ethan stood frozen, the truth collapsing around him like a house of mirrors. If she was right, if Richard had stolen his memories, then the man who danced with Clara wasn't a stranger. He was a ghost of her past. Someone who had once loved her mother, and maybe helped create the horror that blinded her. Ethan whispered, "What do you want me to do?" Evelyn met his gaze, her voice trembling with urgency. "Protect her. Richard's planning something. Another procedure. He wants to erase the rest of her memories, so she never learns the truth." Ethan clenched his fists. "I won't let him." Evelyn nodded, her eyes fierce through the rain. "Then hurry. Tomorrow night, the Harrington Gala. That's when he'll do it." When Ethan got home, the storm had worsened. Lightning split the sky. He collapsed into a chair, drenched, trembling. The walls seemed to close in around him. The mop bucket, The uniform, the quiet nights of cleaning, all of it suddenly felt like a lie built to contain him. He looked in the mirror above the sink. For the first time, he didn't recognize a man staring back. Who was Ethan Cole? And who had he been before Harrington rewrote his life? Ethan didn't sleep that night. How could he? Rain hammered against the windows like the world itself was trying to wake him from the nightmare. But this wasn't a nightmare. It was real. Every echo in his head, every missing piece of his life, was finally beginning to form a shape, jagged and horrifying. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the photo Evelyn had slipped into his hand before she vanished back into fog. It was old, slightly torn at the edges, but unmistakable. A younger version of him stood beside Evelyn, both wearing lab coats, smiling at a child between them. Clara, the little girl, had a gap-toothed grin and held a small red flower in her hand. On the back of the photo, written in neat cursive, "For our daughter, the only pure thing we ever made." Ethan's breath hitched. His hands shook so violently the photo almost slipped from his fingers. He had known her. He'd been part of her life before everything was taken. But how could that be possible? He didn't remember any of it. No lab, no research, no Evelyn, no Clara as a child. Just fragments. A woman's laugh. A sterile white hallway. The sound of a heartbeat monitor. He pressed a trembling hand to his temple as pain bloomed behind his eyes, sharp, splitting, like something trying to claw its way out. And then a flash, so brief it almost felt imagined. He was standing in a lab. Bright lights. Evelyn was shouting, "Stop, Richard, she's a child." A man's voice, cold and commanding. "You had your chance, Evelyn. Now she's mine to perfect." And then the child screamed. Ethan gasped and staggered up, gripping the edge of the sink for balance. The mirror reflected his pale, haunted face. For a split second, it wasn't his reflection looking back. It was a man in a white coat, name badge reading. Dr. Ethan Cole, lead neural systems engineer. His knees nearly gave out. He had been there. He wasn't just a janitor. He was a man who helped create the very system that stole Clara's vision and his own past. The next morning dawned gray and silent. The city felt hollow, drained of color. Ethan went through the motions of preparing Lily's breakfast, but his mind was somewhere else entirely. "Daddy!" Lily's small voice pulled him back. "You look sad." He forced a smile. "Just tired. Sweetheart. Did you have bad dreams again?" He hesitated. "Yeah, something like that." She climbed onto his lap and wrapped her tiny arms around him. "It's okay, Daddy. You can tell me. I won't be scared." The innocence in her voice cut through him like a knife. She was the only real light in his world, and now that light was tangled in the darkness of a past he didn't even remember. He kissed her forehead. "I promise, everything's going to be okay. I just have to fix something first." "Like when you fix the broken things at work?" she asked. He smiled sadly. "Yeah, something like that." By noon, Ethan was parked outside Harrington Global again, staring at the mirrored facade of the building. He wasn't supposed to be there, not after the security warning yesterday. But he needed answers. He had to see Clara. He had to remember. He slipped through the back entrance, blending in with the maintenance crew as he made his way toward the West Wing. Every sound made him flinch, the hiss of the air vents, the hum of security drones overhead. When he reached the records room again, he hesitated only a moment before stepping inside. The smell of disinfectant and paper was stronger now, almost metallic. He went straight for the filing cabinet marked Archive, 2003 to 2006. Inside were stacks of sealed envelopes, all labeled Project CH. His pulse spiked as he tore one open. Inside, handwritten notes, not typed. Evelyn's handwriting. Subject 02, Clara H. Severe post-procedural trauma. Optical cortex partially regenerated, but synaptic feedback loop unstable. Memory fragmentation observed. Subject 01, Ethan C., volunteered for memory link synchronization to stabilize neural pattern transfer. Ethan froze. He read it again, eyes wide. Memory link synchronization. He'd link his brain with Clara's. Their memories, their minds, had once been connected. That was why he felt drawn to her. Why, her voice, her scent, her laughter, everything about her, felt like déjà vu from a life he couldn't place. Because on some level, deep inside, he remembered her through her own memories. He slumped against the filing cabinet, breath coming in sharp gasps, and then the sound of footsteps. He shoved the papers back and turned just as Richard Harrington entered the room. Tall, immaculate, his presence filled the space like a shadow that ate the light. "Ethan Cole," Richard said smoothly. "I was wondering when you'd remember your name." Ethan's blood ran cold. Richard smiled thinly. "I should have known Evelyn would find you first. She always had a talent for sentimentality." Ethan clenched his fists. "What did you do to me?" Richard tilted his head. "I perfected you. You destroyed me." Ethan roared, his voice echoing off the sterile walls. "You took my life, my memories, everything." "I gave you a chance to start again," Richard said coolly. "Your wife was dead. Your mind was breaking. You begged for a way to erase the pain. And you did. You just didn't expect that erasing pain meant erasing truth." Ethan's throat tightened. "You used me. You used your own daughter." Richard's calm expression flickered, a flash of something darker underneath. "She was never meant to suffer. She was meant to evolve. You call this evolution." Ethan snapped. "She can't see. She's terrified of you." Richard stepped closer, his voice dropping to a hiss. "And yet she still obeys. That's power, Ethan. The power to rewrite what people remember, who they are. Do you think governments will care how I achieved it when they can erase wars with a keystroke?" Ethan's stomach twisted. "You're insane." Richard smiled faintly. "No, I'm a visionary. And you, my dear doctor, are proof my vision works." Before Ethan could reply, Richard's hand shot out, injecting a syringe into his neck. The burn hit instantly. His vision blurred. His body went weak. "Sleep now, Ethan," Richard murmured. "By the time you wake, you'll forget this conversation ever happened. Again." The world spun. Ethan fell backward, crashing into the cabinet. The last thing he saw before the darkness swallowed him was Richard's reflection, calm, smug, unshaken. When he woke, he was lying in his van. Morning light poured through the windshield. His head pounded like a drum. For a moment, everything was blank. No Doc, no Evelyn, no files. Then, Lily's voice on a loop in his mind. "Fix the broken things. Daddy." He gasped, clutching his head. Memory fragments surged like sparks. Evelyn's tears, Clara's laughter, Richard's sneer, the photo, and then everything clicked. He remembered everything. The experiments, the memory link, the day it all went wrong. He'd tried to destroy Project CH and rescue Clara when she was still a child. Richard caught him and erased him, turned him into a ghost of his own making. Ethan sat up, drenched in sweat, the van spinning around him. He wasn't just fighting for Clara now. He was fighting for redemption. And tomorrow night, the Gala, would be the night he took everything back. That evening, he stood before the mirror once again, this time not in fear but determination. He tore off his janitor's badge, replacing it with a name that had once been his. Dr. Ethan Cole. His reflection stared back, no longer hollow. He finally knew who he was, and what he had to do. He would save Clara, expose Richard, and bury Project CH forever. But first, he had to walk back into the lion's den. The night of the Gala arrived draped in glassy rain and electric tension. The city skyline glimmered like a mirage through mist as black cars lined the circular drive of the Harrington estate. Every window of the mansion blazed with light, and from within came the swell of a string quartet tuning up, laughter rising like champagne bubbles. To the world, it was another celebration, Harrington Global's 15th anniversary. But to Ethan, it was a battlefield. He stood across the street beneath an umbrella, heart pounding, the bitter taste of adrenaline thick on his tongue. He wore a rented tuxedo that fit just well enough to pass as a guest. Beneath his sleeve, a small flash drive pressed against his skin, the evidence Evelyn had helped him retrieve before she disappeared again. Confidential files, archived recordings, and the last audio log from the original Project CH. He kept hearing her voice in his head. Tonight's the only chance. The world has to see what Richard really is. He looked at the mansion's upper balcony. A shadow moved across the window, Clara's silhouette. He exhaled sharply. "Hang on. Clara, I'm coming." Inside, the ballroom was a perfect replica of the night that started it all. Chandeliers blazing, gold accents, rows of crystal glasses reflecting light like scattered stars. Only this time, the mood was colder. Richard Harrington stood near the center of it all, smiling for the cameras with the same manufactured charm that had built an empire. "Mr. Harrington, what are we toasting to tonight?" a journalist asked. Richard raised his glass. "To vision," he said smoothly, "and the courage to build what others are too afraid to imagine." Ethan felt his stomach twist. Vision. The irony burned. He moved carefully through the crowd, blending in with the tuxedos and glittering gowns, every step measured. His eyes scanned for Clara, for any sign of security, for an opening. But more than anything, he was fighting the memories that clawed at him, flashes of a lab, the hum of machines, Clara's childlike laughter before it turned to screams. His breath quickened. He pressed his hand against the small recorder in his pocket, grounding himself. "Not tonight," he whispered. "Not again." Clara appeared at the top of the staircase like an apparition in white. The crowd turned as one. Even without sight, she moved with a quiet grace that silenced the chatter. Her long silver gown shimmered with each step, and for a heartbeat, Ethan forgot everything. The lies, the pain, the years lost. She reached the bottom of the stairs, cane in hand. A soft smile curved her lips. "Good evening, everyone," she said, her voice steady. "Thank you for being here. My father wanted me to say a few words before the presentation." Ethan moved closer, his heart hammering. Clara continued, unaware of his presence yet drawn by something unseen. "For years, my father has spoken about restoring sight, about changing the way the world perceives disability. But tonight, I want to talk about something else. About truth. Because sometimes what we see isn't what's real. Sometimes the clearest vision comes from darkness." Richard's smile flickered. "Clara," he interjected softly, "that's enough." She turned her head toward his voice. "Is it, Father? Or is that what you always tell people when they start asking questions you don't want answered?" The audience shifted uneasily. A ripple of tension spread through the room. Cameras lowered. Ethan froze. This wasn't part of the plan. She was confronting him publicly. Richard stepped closer, his charm cracking at the edges. "Sweetheart, let's not." But Clara's hand shot up. "No, I'm done letting you speak for me." Her voice trembled, but her words were clear. "You told me the experiment that blinded me was an accident. You told me Dr. Cole died trying to save me. But I found something, a recording you forgot to erase." She reached into her clutch and pulled out a small device. "I know who he is now." The room went dead silent. Richard's face drained the color. And then, from the crowd, Ethan stepped forward. Whispers erupted. People turned. Cameras flashed. Ethan's chest felt like it might cave in, but he kept moving, each step a defiance against every false memory, every stolen truth. Clara's head tilted toward him, as if she could feel his presence. "You came," she whispered, voice trembling with something between hope and disbelief. "I told you I would," he said quietly. "I always promised I'd protect you, didn't I?" A single tear slipped down her cheek. "I remember your voice." Richard's jaw tightened. "Guards!" he barked. But Ethan raised his hand, holding up the flash drive. "Before you do that, maybe you should hear what's on this." He crossed to the projector at the side of the ballroom and slid the drive into the port. The giant screen behind the stage flickered to life, and a crackling audio file began to play. Evelyn's voice. Subject 02's father has ordered full memory extraction. His rewriting a perception of the accident. Dr. Cole opposes the procedure, says it's unethical. He's threatened to expose the project. Recording for documentation. Richard's voice, sharp. If he won't comply, he'll be removed. Make sure the transfer erases his personal file. No trace, no memory, no history. The janitor role should suffice for his re-entry into society. It'll keep him out of the way. Evelyn, and the girl. Richard, blindness is a small price for progress. The room erupted. Guests gasped. Reporters whispered furiously. Cameras started rolling again, this time not for glamour, but for scandal. Clara covered her mouth, shaking. You made me blind. Richard tried to speak, but the noise drowned him out. That recording is taken out of context. Context. Ethan spat. You destroyed our lives. You stole my mind. You turned her into a prototype. God surged forward. Ethan braced himself, but before they reached him, Clara spoke again, her voice breaking. I can't see your face, Father, but I can finally see you, and I don't want to ever again. She turned toward Ethan, her expression trembling but resolute. Take me away from here. He took her hand without hesitation. They ran, through the chaos, through the flash of cameras, through the echo of Harrington's furious shouts. Ethan led her down the back corridor, through the kitchens, out into the rain-soaked night. Alarms began to blare inside. They stumbled through puddles toward his van. Clara was crying silently, her hand gripping his like a lifeline. I remember everything now, she whispered. Your voice in the lab, the way you told me to hold on. You said you'd come back for me. I'm sorry it took so long, Ethan said, opening the van door. But I'm here. She climbed in. Where will we go? Somewhere he can't touch us. Evelyn has a safe house. We'll. He stopped. A red light blinked on the van's dashboard. Then another. A cold realization spread through him. Richard had planned for this. Before Ethan could move, a deafening crack shattered the night. The van's windshield exploded, glass slicing through the air. He ducked instinctively, shielding Clara. The shot came from the mansion steps, the security guard's rifle, trained directly on him. Go! Ethan shouted, starting the engine. The tires squealed as they tore down the wet street, bullets chasing them through the rain. In the rear-view mirror, Richard stood on the mansion steps, soaked, screaming orders. His perfect mask was gone. He looked exactly like what he'd always been. A monster. They drove until city lights vanished and the world turned into open road and shadow. Ethan's hands gripped the wheel so tightly they bled. Beside him, Clara trembled, her face pale but determined. He'll come after us. I know. He won't stop. I know, he repeated softly. That's why we can't stop either. She turned her face toward him. Do you still believe people can change, Ethan? He hesitated, glancing at her. I used to. Now I just believe they can be forgiven. The words hung between them, fragile, uncertain, but real. Behind them, the city glowed like a wound. Ahead, the darkness stretched on. Neither noticed a small red tracker light blinking beneath the van's rear bumper, the one Richard's men had attached an hour before. The Gala might have ended, but the hunt had just begun. The storm followed them out of the city like a living thing. Sheets of rain blurred the road, the wipers struggling to keep pace. Each flash of lightning revealed the empty stretch of highway ahead, slick asphalt, skeletal trees, no headlights behind them. But Ethan knew better. Richard Harrington's reach didn't stop at city limits. Clara sat in the passenger seat, arms wrapped around herself, gown soaked from the run through the rain. Her breathing was shallow, her lips pale. The moment at the Gala replayed between them in silence. Her words, the crowd's gasp, the crack of the first gunshot. She hadn't let go of his hand since. Are we safe now? She asked quietly. Ethan glanced at the mirror. Empty darkness stared back. For now. A small, humorless laugh escaped her. You sound like you've been saying that your whole life. He didn't answer. The engine hummed low, the road unspooling endlessly beneath them. At the edge of his hearing, another sound began to creep in, a faint mechanical whine, almost lost beneath the rain. Do you hear that? Clara asked, her head tilting. Ethan listened harder. The noise grew clearer, rhythmic. Helicopter blades. His pulse spiked. Hold on. The van lurched forward as he pressed the accelerator. The old tires screamed on the wet road, fishtailing for a terrifying second before catching traction. Overhead, a searchlight sliced through the night, grazing the treetops like a white blade. Clara gripped the seat. They found us. Of course they did, Ethan muttered. He's never been able to let go. He turned off the main road onto a narrow service lane that wound through the woods. Branches slapped the sides of the van. The searchlight swept over them again, closer this time. Ethan killed the headlights and cut through the darkness, guided only by instinct and the pale streaks of lightning ahead. "Where are we going?" Clara asked. "Somewhere Evelyn told me about, an old observatory upstate. She used it to store backups of her research. If we can reach it, we'll have everything we need to end this. And after that," he hesitated, "after that, I'll make sure you can disappear. A new name, a new place, somewhere you can live without looking over your shoulder." She was silent for a moment, then said softly, "You talk like you're not coming with me." He didn't reply. They drove for another hour before the rain began to ease. The forest gave way to open fields, and the helicopter sound finally faded behind them. The tension in Ethan's shoulders began to loosen, replaced by exhaustion. "You should rest," he said. Clara shook her head. "If I sleep, I'll see him." Ethan looked at her, pale skin, eyes unfocused but glistening, lips trembling from cold and memory. He reached over, wordlessly draping his jacket around her shoulders. She smiled faintly. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," he said. "You deserved better long before I came along." The van rolled into a stretch of back roads that seemed almost forgotten by time. A sign passed by, Silver Ridge Observatory, 5 miles. He exhaled slowly. Almost there. But then the dashboard light blinked red again. Clara frowned. "Is it happening again?" "Not the tracker this time," Ethan muttered, checking the gauges. "Fuel's low. Too low." He pulled the van onto the shoulder and popped the hood. Steam hissed up into the night. The fuel line had been nicked, maybe by shrapnel, maybe deliberate. Either way, they weren't going much farther. Clara stepped out carefully, using the door for balance. "Can we walk?" "It's 5 miles in the dark, uphill," Ethan said. "But yay, we can." He retrieved a flash drive, a small backpack, and a portable drive containing Evelyn's files. Then he looked at Clara. "Can you manage the terrain?" She gave a small, resolute nod. "I can't see, Ethan. Not helpless." A wry smile tugged at his mouth. "Fair enough." They began walking. The night was quieter here, only the whisper of wind through tall grass. The road wound upward through the hills, the observatory a dark shape against the clouds ahead. For a moment, it almost felt peaceful, two souls crossing the remnants of a broken past. Then, far behind them, an engine roared. Ethan turned. Headlights cut through the darkness, small at first but growing fast. "Not one pair, several. Run," he said. The sound grew deafening. SUVs, black and armored, speeding up the hill. Clara stumbled as her heels caught in the wet dirt, but Ethan caught her arm. "This way." He dragged her off the road, into the trees. They crashed through the underbrush, branches clawing at their clothes. Clara's breathing was ragged, but she kept pace, one hand clutching his sleeve. The vehicle skidded to a stop on the road behind them. Beams of light swept across the woods. "Spread out," a voice shouted. "Find them." Ethan guided her deeper, every muscle burning. A spotlight grazed the trees, then another. Bullets weren't necessary. Not yet. Richard wanted them alive. For now. A sudden clearing opened ahead. The observatory loomed at the far edge, a rusted dome surrounded by fallen fencing and wild vines. They reached the door just as the first shouts echoed closer. Ethan shoved it open, dragging Clara inside. The heavy door slammed shut behind them with a hollow boom. Inside, the air smelled of dust and disuse. The main hall was filled with broken equipment, cobwebs glittering faintly in the dim light filtering through cracks in the dome. Ethan found a heavy beam and jammed it against the door. Clara leaned against the wall, panting. Is this where Evelyn was hiding? Used to be. She kept duplicates of everything here. If we can access them. He stopped mid-sentence. A faint red light blinked from a console at the far end of the room. He approached cautiously, brushing dust off the old terminal. Access granted. User, EH, Evelyn. Files began scrolling across the screen. Schematics, audio logs, photographs. Ethan inserted the flash drive and initiated the upload. Outside, the shouts grew louder. Clara stood close, listening to the hum of the machine. What happens if we get this out? The world sees what is done, Ethan said. He can't erase both of us again. Thunder cracked outside, not from the sky this time, but from an explosion. The door shuddered violently. A second blast followed. Closer. Dust rained from the ceiling. "They are here," Clara whispered. Ethan turned to her, voice low and urgent. "There's a service tunnel under the dome. It leads down to the river. You follow it until you see light. Don't stop for anything." "What about you?" "I have to finish the upload." "I'm not leaving you." He looked at her, eyes dark but gentle. "You have to. If he gets me, he doesn't get this. That's the only way any of this means something." Tears welled in her sightless eyes. "I can't lose you again." "You won't," he said. "You'll remember me this time." The door groaned. A bright crack of light split the seam. Ethan handed her the small recorder. "Take it. It's our insurance." Clara hesitated, then reached up and pressed her hand against his face. "Promise me something." "What?" "Don't let him make you like him." He covered her hand with his own. "I won't." She turned, finding the hatch in the floor by touch, and slipped into the darkness below just as the door gave way. The room flooded with light and noise. Armed men poured in, shouting commands. Ethan backed toward the console, the upload bar crawling toward completion. 97%, 98. Richard entered last, immaculate even amid chaos. His eyes burned with something between fury and heartbreak. "You never knew when to stop," Richard said. Ethan met his gaze. "Neither did you." Richard lifted the gun. "You could have stayed a ghost. I gave you peace. You gave me nothing but guilt." The console chimed softly. "Upload complete." Ethan smiled, faintly. "Looks like the world's finally going to see you, Richard." Richard fired. The impact threw Ethan backward. Pain bloomed white-hot through his side, but the smile never left his face. The monitor behind him flashed a single message. Transmission sent. Outside, siren began to wail in the distance. Police, press, maybe both. The floodlights shifted. Richard's face drained of color. "What did you do?" he whispered. Ethan's breathing came shallow, but his voice was steady. "I just turned the lights on." Far below, Clara emerged from the tunnel onto the riverbank, soaked and shivering. Above her, the night sky had cleared. She turned back toward the hill just in time to see the dome of the observatory burst with light, the storm clouds reflecting it like dawn. For the first time in years, she smiled through her tears. She couldn't see it, but she could feel it. Freedom. The observatory burned against the horizon like a dying star. Clara stood at the edge of the riverbank, her breath visible in the cold night air. Her hands trembled, not just from the chill but from the weight of what she'd left behind. The man who'd given her back her courage only to lose himself again in the fire. For a long time, she just stood there, listening to the echoes of sirens drawing closer, mingling with the distant roar of flames devouring the hill. Somewhere in that chaos, Ethan was gone, or maybe, part of her whispered, he was finally free. The recorder in her pocket fell heavier with every heartbeat. "Don't let him make you like him," she whispered to the wind, her voice breaking. "You didn't." She turned away from a burning sky and started walking downstream. The river shimmered faintly in the moonlight. Each step was unsteady, her shoes waterlogged, her dress torn and caked with mud. But she kept moving, one step, then another, because stopping meant collapsing under the grief clawing at her chest. By the time dawn bled into the world, Clara had reached the edge of a small town. The locals had gathered near the main road, murmuring to one another about the explosion up on the ridge. A few offered her blankets, some coffee, and questions she couldn't yet answer. At the local diner, a kind waitress named Marla led her to a corner booth. "Are you all right, sweetheart? You look like you've been through hell." Clara forced a tired smile. "Something like that." Marla set down a cup of black coffee and glanced out the window at the smoke still rising far off in the hills. "You were up there, weren't you?" Clara hesitated, then nodded. "Someone I loved was." Marla didn't ask more. She just placed a gentle hand on Clara's shoulder before walking away, leaving her alone with the steam curling from her cup and the faint hum of the jukebox. For the first time in years, Clara removed her sunglasses. Her sightless eyes turned toward the light streaming through the blinds, soft, golden, unfiltered. She let it touch her face, and for a fleeting moment, she swore she could almost see him in it. By mid-morning, the story had broken nationwide. Industrialist Richard Harrington implicated in decade-long conspiracy and murder cover-up. Whistleblower files expose corruption at highest levels. Unknown source uploads evidence to global network. Every screen, every broadcast carried pieces of the truth Ethan had unleashed before his final breath. The world finally knew who Richard Harrington truly was, and who he had destroyed to keep his empire untouchable. The news reached Clara at the bus station. She sat quietly as strangers scrolled through their phones around her, some gasping, some whispering. A young man nearby showed a headline to his girlfriend. "They say some anonymous team exposed it all," he said. "Whoever they were, they brought the bastard down." Clara smiled faintly, her fingers brushing the recorder hidden in her coat. She didn't need to correct him. Let the world think it was a team. Let Ethan's ghost live quietly in the silence between headlines. She boarded the next bus heading north. No luggage, no name, just a promise carried in her heart and a flash drive in her pocket. Flashback 2 years earlier. The first night she met Ethan, the world had felt like it was finally breathing again. She'd stumbled into the roadside diner after a charity gala gone wrong, tears smeared, heels in hand. He'd been sitting in a corner booth, sketching something in a small notebook. He looked up when she entered, eyes quiet but curious, as if he recognized her soul before her face. "You look like you've been running," he'd said. "Maybe I have," she'd replied. He'd smiled gently. "I used to, too." They'd talk for hours about everything. Art, pain, the suffocating weight of pretending to be fine. He never told her his last name, and she never asked. For once, she didn't need to perform. For once, someone saw her without the armor. That was the night she learned the strange, fragile thing that existed between them wasn't just love. It was understanding. Two broken pieces that somehow fit together, even if the world kept pulling them apart. Present day, 6 months later. A cabin nestled in the northern woods, snow blanketing the roof like quiet forgiveness. Inside, Clara sat by the window, her fingers dancing across a Braille keyboard. The fire crackled softly beside her, and an old radio played low, classical, mostly. Ethan had loved Debussy. Her life had become small, deliberate. She wrote under a pseudonym, sending essays about courage, loss, and redemption to journals that never knew her face. The royalties went to a foundation she quietly created, the Evelyn Hope Initiative, dedicated to helping whistleblowers and survivors rebuild. But tonight, she was writing something different. A letter. "Ethan, I keep hearing your voice in the wind when the snow falls. You always said the world isn't kind, but it can be honest. You prove that. You gave it back its truth, and me, my sight. Not in the way you thought, but something deeper. I can't see faces, but I see purpose now. I see light in places I once thought were gone forever. You told me once that ghosts are just memories that refuse to fade. If that's true, then I hope you never fade completely. Stay here a little longer, in the warmth, in the quiet, in the spaces between my heartbeats. You are the light that remains." Clara. She saved the file, then reached into the small wooden box on the table, the one she'd carried from town to town before finally settling here. Inside lay 2 items, the worn flash drive and a photograph of the observatory before it had burned. For a long time, she held them both, then whispered, "Rest now." She closed the box gently. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and endless. The world had moved on, but in that small cabin, love still lingered, quiet, fierce, eternal. Elsewhere, unknown location. A small island off the northern coast. A fisherman returning from the sea spotted something strange on the beach. A man washed ashore, barely breathing but alive. Dark hair, scars along his ribs, eyes opening slowly to the gray morning light. When the fisherman leaned closer, the man whispered one word before passing out. "Clara." The fisherman frowned, hauling him to safety. As the waves rolled in and out, the wind carried a familiar sound. Not quite words, but something like a promise returning home. The sea has a strange way of keeping secrets. It buries him beneath its gray waves, hides him among shifting tides. Then one day, when the world least expects it, it gives one back. When Ethan opened his eyes, everything was sound. Waves lapping, wind howling, the rhythmic creak of wood. He wasn't dead, though for a long moment he wished he had been. Salt stung his lips. His body ached from shoulder to spine, every nerve screaming with memories of fire and falling steel. The last thing he remembered was the explosion, the air collapsing, the sound swallowing itself, and then blackness. Now, he lay wrapped in coarse blankets on a wooden cot, the scent of seawater and fish stick around him. "Easy, lad," came a voice, rough but kind. "You've been out for 2 days." Ethan tried to speak, but his throat was raw. "Where?" "Small island off the coast," the fisherman said. "You're lucky I found you when I did. Another hour and the tide would have taken you for good." The man introduced himself as Tom, a widower who lived alone in a shack perched above the waves. His hands were thick with calluses, his face weathered by years of storms. "Didn't find no ID on you," Tom said, stirring a pot over the fire. "Just this." He handed Ethan a soaked scrap of cloth, a torn piece of a cleaning uniform. Ethan stared at it for a long time, realizing it was the only thing that tied him to the life he'd left behind. He should have died. Maybe he had, in some ways. Days passed. Tom's shack was small but warm, filled with the smell of salt and old wood. Ethan spent most of that first week healing, sleeping through fevers, his mind replaying the explosion again and again. Sometimes he dreamed of Clara's voice, calling his name through the fire. Other nights, he dreamed of Harrington's face, that flash of shock before everything turned to flame. He'd lost everything, but he was alive, and that meant something. When his strength returned, he asked Tom for a radio. The old man chuckled. "Ain't much signal out here, but you can try." Static filled the small cabin. Ethan turned the dial slowly, listening through the crackle until, finally, a faint voice broke through. "Reports confirm. Harrington Industries dissolved after mounting evidence. Global scandal. Whistleblower data files trace to unknown source." Ethan's chest tightened. The plan had worked. Clara had made it out. He gripped the edge of the table, emotion flooding through him. Relief, pain, disbelief. He wanted to see her. Needed to. But where could he even begin? He was a ghost now, presumed dead, and perhaps safer that way. Tom noticed his silence. "Someone you lost." Ethan nodded. "Someone I shouldn't have found in the first place." Weeks later, Tom taught Ethan how to fish, how to mend nets, how to listen to the sea. It was a life of silence and rhythm. 2 men who didn't ask questions they weren't ready to answer. But every night, when the fire burned low, Ethan would sit by the window and stare across the endless horizon, whispering her name like a prayer the ocean might carry north. Then one evening, while repairing a net outside, Tom approached holding a folded newspaper, creased, damp, and a few weeks old. "Mail boat brought this," he said. "Thought you'd want to see." The headline made Ethan's breath catch. "The Evelyn Hope Initiative launches, founded by whistleblower's daughter." Below the photo was a woman in dark glasses, standing beside a plaque that read, "In memory of those who gave everything for truth." Clara, even through the grainy print, he recognized her stance, shoulders squared, chin lifted, that quiet strength she carried like light in darkness. He ran his thumb across her picture. "She's alive," he whispered. Tom gave him a sideways look. "Seems to me you got a reason to leave this rock." Ethan hesitated. He'd built something like peace here, quiet, safety, anonymity. But peace without purpose was just waiting to die. He spent the night sitting on the shore, staring at the moon's reflection trembling on the water. The waves whispered their question again and again. "What are you still doing here?" By dawn, he had his answer. The return. It took Ethan weeks to reach the mainland. He worked on fishing boats, traded labor for food and a ride. By the time he made it north, snow had already begun to fall, fine flakes glinting in the pale morning light. He followed the address listed under the initiative's registry. A small cabin in the woods. Familiar somehow, though he couldn't say why. The path wound between frost-covered pines, the air filled with silence so deep it felt sacred. When he reached the clearing, He saw smoke curling from the chimney, golden light glowing through the windows. He stopped a few yards away, unsure whether to step forward or turn back. Maybe she had moved on. Maybe she was better off believing he was gone. But then, the door opened. Clara stood there, holding a mug, listening to the wind. Her hair had grown longer, tied loosely behind her head. A scarf was draped around her shoulders. She tilted her face toward the sound of his boots crunching in the snow. "Ethan!" The word left her lips like a prayer. He froze. His heart hammered against his ribs. "Clara!" She took a shaky step forward, tears already spilling down her cheeks. You're alive." He nodded, unable to speak. The world tilted as she ran to him, arms finding his chest, fingers clutching his coat as if afraid he'd vanish again. He held her just as tightly, burying his face in her hair. The scent of pine, soap, and salt water filled his lungs. "I thought I lost you," she whispered. "You almost did," he murmured. But the sea had other plans. She laughed through tears, the sound trembling with disbelief and joy. "You're freezing." "So are you." They stood there for a long time, wrapped in the silence of falling snow, neither daring to move, afraid that reality might catch up and undo the miracle between them. Inside, the cabin was warm, familiar. Ethan noticed the fireplace, the Braille keyboard, the little wooden box on the table. Clara poured him tea with steady hands, though her fingers trembled faintly. "How?" she asked finally. "Fishermen found me. Island off the coast. I couldn't come back right away." "You thought I was dead," she said softly. "I was supposed to be." Clara reached across the table, finding his hand. "You don't have to explain. You came back. That's enough." But it wasn't. He had to tell her everything, about Tom, about his guilt, about the years he'd spent haunted by what he'd lost. She listened quietly, her thumb tracing circles on his palm. When he finished, she smiled, small, tired, but real. "You gave me back my sight," she said. "Not the kind people mean, but the kind that matters. The world can be cruel, Ethan, but it's not blind anymore. Because of you." He shook his head. "Because of us." They fell silent again, the fire crackling softly between them. Later that night, when the wind rose outside and the forest whispered against the cabin walls, Ethan stood at the door, watching snow drift down like ash from another lifetime. He felt Clara's hand slip into his. No words, just warmth. For the first time since that night in the ballroom, neither of them felt like they were standing on opposite sides of a world built by power and fear. They were just two souls who had survived the storm. And somewhere deep within the hush of winter, Ethan realized the truth he'd spent years running from. The sea hadn't spared him to haunt the past. It had spared him to start again. 5 years later, the city shimmered again with light, but this time it wasn't the glare of wealth or vanity. It was something gentler, the glow of redemption. The Harrington estate had long been sold. In its place stood the Evelyn Hope Foundation headquarters, a glass and stone building surrounded by open gardens and sculptures made by local artists. Tonight it hosted its annual charity gala, not for luxury, not for status, but for rebuilding lives torn apart by corruption, greed, and silence. And at the heart of it all stood Clara Harrington, her hand resting on the cane she barely used now, her eyes still pale but more alive than ever. She moved through the hall with quiet confidence, greeting guests, laughing softly when volunteers called her name. She was no longer the fragile daughter hidden behind her father's name. She was a force, the voice of truth her father had silenced in others. As the orchestra began to tune, someone whispered near the stage, "She always saves the last dance for him." No one asked who him was. They all knew. Everyone in the foundation had heard pieces of the story. The janitor who'd changed the course of her life, the man who had vanished into fire and returned from sea. The legend had grown, softened by time, but those who truly knew Clara could tell that the love was real, not myth. Ethan arrived quietly, as he always did. A simple suit, nothing expensive. He still worked with his hands, carpentry now, helping rebuild homes to displaced families through the foundation's outreach branch. His hair was flecked with gray, his shoulders broader from years of labor, but his eyes held the same steady gentleness that had once guided her across the ballroom floor. He stood near the edge of the crowd, unnoticed for a while, content to watch. Clara moved like light, her laughter mixing with music, her presence drawing people close. Yet every few moments, her head tilted slightly, as if listening for a familiar step among the noise. Then she turned and found him. Her smile bloomed instantly. "You're late." Ethan grinned. "I had to fix the railing outside. Some things never change." "Always fixing what others break," she teased softly. He offered his arm. "And you, still saving the world." "Not quite," she whispered. "Just trying to make it a little less blind." He chuckled. "Then let's remind them how we started." The orchestra began to play a waltz, the same one that had filled that first night, years ago, under the chandeliers of a life neither of them wanted to remember. The crowd parted instinctively, not out of reverence but affection. They'd all heard the story. They wanted to see it, even if they couldn't fully understand it. Ethan guided Clara to the center of the floor. His hand found Hayes, callous warmth against soft trust. Her other hand rested lightly against his chest. She tilted her face upward, smiling. "I still can't see you," she said, "but I know you're smiling." "I am," he whispered. "I always do when you're near." They began to move. The years between them melted away. It wasn't the same dance as before. It was slower, deeper, every step a memory, every turn a promise fulfilled. Where once she'd hesitated, now she moved freely, guided not by sight but by faith. The music swelled, filling the hall like a heartbeat. Around them, guests stood in silence, watching the janitor and the CEO's daughter move as if time itself bowed to their rhythm. Ethan leaned close, murmuring, "You know, I never thought I'd set foot in another gala again." Clara smiled. "That's because you always thought galas were about power. Tonight, they're about light." He chuckled. "You always were better at seeing what matters." She lifted her chin, a playful spark in her tone. "And you were always the one who made me believe it." As the final notes trembled into silence, Clara's hand found his cheek. "You once told me the world wasn't kind," she whispered. "But you were wrong." He smiled faintly. "Oh, what changed your mind?" "You did." The crowd erupted in applause, not polite, not rehearsed, but raw and genuine, the kind of sound born from witnessing something pure. Ethan bowed slightly, but Clara simply stood there, letting the echoes wash over her, her hand still in his. And for a fleeting moment, he saw her not as a blind girl who needed his hand to find a place, but as a woman who'd found her voice and given him back his life. Later that night, when the guests had gone and the music faded, Ethan and Clara walked through the empty hall together. The floor still shimmered faintly with reflections of chandeliers, just like that first night. He noticed her pause near the piano, the same make as the one she'd stood beside years ago. She reached out, running her fingers along its surface. "It's funny," she said softly. "I used to think that first night ruined everything. And now—" She turned her face toward him, her smile small but luminous. "Now I think it saved us both." He slipped an arm around her shoulders. "Maybe everything that broke us was just leading us here." Clara leaned into him. "You really believe that?" "I have to," he murmured. "Otherwise the fire wins." They stepped out into the winter night. Snow drifted lazily from the sky, covering the streets in quiet white. The city lights glowed below, softer now, although even the world had learned to breathe slower. Clara turned her face toward the wind, listening. "Do you hear that?" Ethan smiled. "What?" "The sea. It's far away, but it's still there. It never forgets." He nodded, tightening his arm around her. "Neither do I." They stood there for a long moment, the sound of the wind mingling with faint music from inside, the lingering echo of their last dance. Then, without a word, Clara rested her head against his shoulder. Ethan closed his eyes. He could feel her heartbeat, steady, strong, alive, and in that rhythm, he heard everything they had survived, the lies, the fire, the loss, the sea, and the silence that had once separated them. All of it had led here, to this simple truth, that love, no matter how broken or battered, could still rebuild what the world tried to destroy. Epilogue. Years later, in a small park near the Foundation's headquarters, a bronze statue stood beneath the oak trees. It depicted a man and a woman mid-dance, his hand guiding Hayes, her head tilted slightly upward, trusting the music only she could hear. At the base, a small inscription read, "To those who see light even in darkness." Dedicated to Ethan and Clara Harrington. Children often played near it, their laughter echoing through the park. Most never knew the full story behind the statue, only that it stood for hope. But sometimes, when the winter wind swept through the city, the sound of the trees rustling would almost sound like distant music, a waltz, soft and eternal, played for two souls who refused to give up on each other. And somewhere, in that quiet rhythm, their story still lived, not in tragedy, but in grace, in truth, in the light that remained.